Hey, Corey. I had a friend ask me a question the other day.
You don't have any friends.
It was a colleague, actually. I had a colleague ask me the other day, "Do am I having a midlife crisis?"
They asked you if you're having a midlife crisis, or they asked if they're having a midlife crisis.
Ooh, I think they asked if I was having a midlife crisis.
Well, they would say, "Are you having a midlife crisis?" Or did they say, "Am I having a midlife crisis?"
Yeah, they definitely said you, as in me,
Okay.
referring to me.
Okay.
Am I having a midlife crisis? They said, "I see you have a podcast now. Are you okay? Are you having a midlife crisis?"
Does everyone that starts a podcast in the middle of their life, are they all having a midlife crisis?
I mean, you look. Rogan was around that age when he when he started his podcast. Maybe it was a midlife crisis. I don't know.
I never thought about that.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I don't have an answer either. I think it's something we need to talk about.
Okay, let's get into it.
Boom! Opening credits. Well, welcome everybody to Second Story. We are going to try something a little bit different this week. We're going to try to actually make the show good. I'm just kidding. We are going to try something different, though. The show's always great. It's a great show. It's the best show on the internet. I'd put it against anything. We're going to have an episode where it's just Corey and I. And, we have a lot of these conversations, obviously, off air. You and I talk a lot about things in our lives, some pretty significant things, too. And
Yes,
as I mentioned in the opening, one of the things that I've been sort of thinking about is, am I having a midlife crisis? And it's something that I've really thought about. So I wanted to put the question to you. Are you having a midlife crisis, Corey?
Well, I'm still pretty young. I'm not in the middle of my life yet.
No, you're very old. You're actually right at the point where you should be if you're having a midlife crisis.
Statistically, I'm over my midlife.
That's true. Yeah. And I got news for you. Your midlife was probably 17 years ago when I met you. So, anyways, carry on. Sorry. I've seen the way you live. I hate to break it to you.
God damn, I met you when I was 25. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
That's not good. 6 years left.
Ugh, better get some stuff done over the next 6 years.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's a good question. I know that I'm definitely going through something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, I don't know. Every day I'm thinking, like, I think at this age, the problem is you start thinking a lot about legacy and have I done enough and what am I doing for my kids and am I doing the right things for my kids and are we going to be set up for their future and our future and all this shit. So
financially, you mean?
Yeah. So I know definitely lately I've been going through a lot of stuff, like going through like different pains and everything else that I haven't had before in my life. And I'm trying to fix that. And, that stuff affects my business life and it affects my daily life and it affects my sleep. And so trying to improve all those things. I don't know if that's a midlife crisis exactly, but I know I definitely ask myself every day, what things do I need to change to feel better and have a better outcome?
Yeah. So I thought to start this off, we should actually look at what a midlife crisis is. I actually went through a whole bunch of resources. There's no one like template for what a midlife crisis actually is. A lot of different places list a lot of different things. So I pulled this up. This is from helpguide.org. They say, what is a midlife crisis? Midlife takes place approximately between the ages of 40 or 60, give or take a few years. And one common belief about this stage of life is that you should expect to face inner turmoil about your identity, your life choices, and mortality. In other words, a midlife crisis. So they get into the specifics in the article about what are signs of a midlife crisis. I'm going to list these off for you, and then we'll talk about them. So deep sadness and regret. That's the
daily.
I do feel regret that I ever became your friend.
that we started this podcast, or
that we started this podcast, that
just this friendship. Holy,
this friendship. Yeah. I think back to 2005 and I'm like, I could have just looked the other way and said, "What's up?" to someone else, to anyone else.
Yeah.
And life would have been just.
It was just me and you in the room at the time, I guess. So
yeah, it would have been weird. I would have looked like I was talking to the wall, but maybe that would have been better. So deep sadness and regret is the first one.
Okay.
Restlessness and daydreaming, which I know you and I both all the time.
Big
the time.
time.
Yeah. Irritability.
Oh, I'm pissed off right now.
Yeah. You want to get some stuff off your chest?
Yeah, I'm laughing, but I'm pissed.
Yeah. I always laugh when I'm pissed.
Yeah.
For sure. So irritability is the third one. Nostalgia.
Yeah. Okay.
For sure. Impulsive and indulgent behavior.
I haven't had too much of that.
Indulgence. So I don't either now, but when I talk about my midlife crisis, we'll talk about that. Okay. Changes in ambition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then they've got changes in sexual desire. So that's it. Those are the ones. Now, they do say in the article that some of these signs may be mistaken for symptoms of depression, and then knowing the difference can help you. And then they list off sort of what's depression and what would be considered part of a midlife crisis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I didn't want to use just one resource. So here's what they say on Men's Health, which feel however you want to feel about Men's Health. But they say, here's 5 signs of a midlife crisis. You want to spend your Saturdays playing football instead of watching it on the couch. So you want to get involved in sports and, act like you're in your 30s when you're in your 40s. My 30s were injury riddled. So make of that what you will.
I think a lot about not so much sports, but more like, man, I should get out fishing or like that kind of thing. Like, oh, I should get outdoors and go do something instead of watching this fishing show on TV. I should go fishing.
Yeah, it's like the episode where you watch a video on how to take a walk instead of just going for a walk. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's right.
So the second one, so this is Men's Health again. So you want to spend your Saturdays playing football instead of watching it on the couch. 2, your college plan of being a novelist is haunting your dreams. I mean, come on, for me. You worry your wife doesn't find you sexy anymore.
I don't have that problem, but you probably do.
No, me neither. No, broken hips and all. My wife still thinks I'm a snack. So is that the expression the kids are using? I don't know. Number 4, you worry an underling is going to steal your job.
I own my business, so that's
no.
Maybe.
And for me, I'm like, fucking have at it. Like, go for it. you do it. And then number 5, your hobbies and habits don't really make you happy.
Yes. Okay.
So
which list do you want to go off of here?
I kind of want to go off the first one. I could touch on both of them, but I kind of want to go off the one from helpguide.org. That is to me, I look at it and it seems like it's a bit more, like, no offense to the lovely people at Men's Health, but this feels a bit more researched and a bit more, I guess, clinical, I would say, than the Men's Health one. So, so you're not sure if you're in a midlife crisis right now?
I guess I've just never defined it as that, but I'm definitely going through some shit, so maybe.
Yeah.
So
to put it into context, Corey is 49 years old.
Fuck off. 43, 44 in like a month.
He'll be 44. Yeah. So he'll be 44 in about a month, and I'm going to be 39 in a month. So I am what would be considered young to have a midlife crisis, and Corey would be considered ripe for one. Fair enough to say? Yeah. So I started really thinking about this when somebody asked me if I was having a midlife crisis, and I actually think I've already gone through it, which doesn't bode well for my longevity, but it's obviously just an expression. But I actually think I already went through it, the midlife crisis. And I think it was actually part of the birth of this whole thing, of what you and I are trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the show was not, it was not just my idea. It was something you and I talked about for a long, long time. It was something that we kind of went back and forth on, and like what would be the, the theme of it and stuff like that. But it was sort of born out of what I think was my own midlife crisis. And my midlife crisis, I believe, was when I was 36 years old. And I went through a lot of stuff. This was during kind of the height of the pandemic, and I went through a lot of stuff and a lot of real, changing in the way I felt about things, particularly myself. Um, and I don't know that I necessarily had like a deep sadness during that time, but I definitely had a lot of time to think about what I was regretting in my life. And when I say
Mm-hmm.
regret, I mean professionally, because like my family, I have no regrets about my family, my relationships with my wife, my kids, like those are all fantastic. But professionally, boy, do I have some regrets. And I'm sure you're
Right.
probably fairly similar.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So it made me think about yours too, because you obviously went through some, professionally, you went through some huge changes. I wonder if maybe you had something akin to a midlife crisis just earlier in your life.
Well, I've it's funny you said 36 because I'm just trying to think about what age that was that I was working at the bank. And then,
I think you would have been 35, would you not? Or 34, maybe?
you know what? I think I was 36,
That's weird.
to be
That's weird.
honest.
We've actually never
Yeah.
talked about this.
Yeah. Because I believe it was around 2016 that I left. So yeah, I was working in a corporate job, hated my life, became extremely depressed, wasn't talking to my family. Like I was really just not, I was just a shell of a human at that time. And yeah, then some things kind of came into place and I left. I took a big pay cut. I took a contract job and got the hell out of Dodge. And yeah, but that was when I was 36.
Yeah, so very similar to me. I have not left my profession yet, but everything that I do in terms of like hobbies and spare time and the show and my writing and all the things that I do are in a journey that I'm on to try to leave the corporate world. That's what I want to do, and I'm not there yet, but that's where I'm headed.
Yeah.
And it all started at that time, 36 years old. So we've talked about it a little bit on the show, but when I was 36, it was the height of the pandemic. I went through some major physical issues. I ended up in the hospital for almost 6 weeks. I had a lot of time to just sit there alone. They were only allowing my wife to come in 1 hour a day. So I had no visitors, nothing. I didn't have internet. I didn't have a TV. I literally laid in bed and would only talk to people on the phone. And my data on my cell phone didn't even work, which was wild. So like I literally just sat there and wrote and thought, and that was really all I could do. I couldn't even get out of bed. Um, and during that time, I had a lot of. I mean, you remember talking to me. I was angry and I was full
Hmm.
of regret, and I had so much time to just stew in everything that I'd done wrong, my own mistakes, and it felt like honestly I was going through a midlife crisis at that point. And while it was a horrible experience to go through that, and the following like 6 to 9 months were really awful too, because I had that anger and that regret and stuff like that. I went through some major changes in my life in just about every facet of it, right down to the way I look at things and the way I react to things and feel about stuff. Like it was a massive change in who I am, basically, like down to my core. I'm a different person than I was before I went into the hospital.
This episode is brought to you by Bad Workwear North America. Bad is a fashion forward workwear brand from Australia with a wide selection of workwear for men and women that is not only durable and functional, but stylish and modern as well. With items like slim fit work pants, waterproof hoodies, and a robust women's lineup, you're sure to find something you'll love. They offer free returns and exchanges on all orders. And listeners of this show, you can use the code Second Story at checkout to get 10% off your first order at badnorthamerica.com. Once again, use the code Second Story at badnorthamerica.com and treat yourself to some new gear. You got to wonder because, like, a lot of, self help people and different influencers and that on the internet, they talk about going through major challenges as being growth. And I just wonder, like, when you were in that situation, because it was such a big challenge and kind of an eye opener for you, I'm sure,
Hmm.
just
Yep.
health wise and everything.
Yep.
Um, but I just wonder, not having those distractions like your cell phone with the data, not having people around you influencing you in a certain way and all that stuff. I wonder if that um, kind of drove that ambition almost, and that kind of creative thinking.
Yeah, it probably did. I had been a creative thinker before that. Like I'd written Second Story. I'd finished it the year prior to that, and that was like a
Hmm.
big professional milestone and something I'm still to this day very proud of. But I kind of reached that pinnacle and it did very well, and it was like, critically people loved it, which was great. And I was so excited about that. But then there was this big emptiness after. Like once it kind of was out there and people had all read it and it was over, it was like huge emptiness. And then of course ending up in the hospital.
Hmm.
And yeah, that is what it felt like. We created Second Story out of these moments that we just talked about as like the pivotal moment in our life that kind of changed things. And I will always say that mine was meeting my wife. My big second story was meeting my wife because she put me on a completely different path. But this was almost like you know a second story, so to speak. Like it was just
Yep.
everything sort of hit the brakes, and I had a chance to reevaluate everything that was good in my life and everything bad. And there was a lot of good in my life at that time, and of course there still is. But yeah, like the regret, I found that I really spent a lot of time just thinking about what I had done wrong in my life, and man, did it hurt. And it was hard to move past. And to be honest with you, the thing that made me move past it, or one of them, was one of my friends got me this book by Ryan Holiday. I forget the name of it. Actually, it's right back there. I'm gonna grab it.
Okay.
But like I picked up this book one afternoon and I was like really in a bad mood, but I want oops. Oops. I really
Whoops.
I really wanted to entertain myself for a few hours. So I picked up this book. It's called The Obstacle in the Way by Ryan Holiday. And basically it's about turning, shit luck or trials. What he says trials instead of shit luck, but turning trials into like triumph, which is what we talk about all the time on the Second Story 1 minute shorts in this show, like turning you know, your the bad things that happen in your life, turning them into good. And that was what I once I read this book, I had like, it was sort of the start of like me feeling, okay, this is sort of the birth of me changing a lot of things in my life. And, there was the physical aspect of it. It's like, I got to get up and walk, and I got to be able to, play with my kids again and run and be a husband and be a father and, work and provide and do all these things. So that was like
Hmm.
kind of step one, but it went beyond that. Like it went from like, I need to get up and walk to I need to actually be healthy so I live a long time. So that went
Right.
into like, I got to change the amount I exercise. I got to change the way I eat. I got to not be eating Doritos at midnight every night of the week and drinking
Yeah.
Tecatis, As much as I love
Yeah.
Doritos and Tecati, I can't be doing that every night. So all
Yeah,
these
for
things
sure.
had to change physically, but then there was like the professional aspect of it, like, and kind of what you dealt with. But that was sort of my moment. And you and I were on the phone a lot when I was in the hospital,
Hmm.
and I started to talk to you about this stuff, like what I wanted to do, and you were into it too, because I think you had been there, and it was good for me to talk to somebody who had actually been through something similar.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I know a lot of people, you hear about these stories about people on their deathbed and looking back in their life, and they're never like, man, I wish I had made more money, or I wish I had closed that deal, or whatever. It's usually regret about, you know, um, finding happiness in what you do and purpose and spending more time with your family and things like that people regret on their deathbed.
Hmm.
And what's that quote about? Either go through, was it pain of discipline or pain of regret?
Yeah, that's what I've written on my desktop. You can either go through the pain of discipline, or you can go through the pain of regret.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess what you're going through right now, and trying to do that and trying to better yourself and like pushing yourself through like the pain, literal pain of your hips
Yeah.
and everything
Yeah.
else, is you're going through that pain of discipline instead of, you're trying to avoid the pain of regret.
Mhm. Yeah, big time. Because I've lived through the pain of regret, so have you. And yeah, a lot of it was professional. I didn't really have, other than maybe my relationship with my dad, who is deceased. And I didn't really regret much of the relationship, just sort of not being able to be there for him at the end of his life. That was really my big regret. But
Hmm.
yeah, like professionally, I had a lot of regrets. And
Yeah.
I found that after reading this book and like kind of moving through all of that and sort of having it go through my head and being able to deal with it, it I stopped having those regrets and I started to really embrace like a lot of the principles of stoicism, like don't waste time on regrets, like you can't control the past type of thing. And then I started to really grab control of the future, like where my life's going to go. And I have friends. We went out to dinner on Saturday, and my one buddy was like, I can't believe how disciplined you are to be able to write every day, to be able to like make these videos for your show, to be able to work, be a dad, like do all these things. It's like, how do you do it? And I showed him like my schedule and how I schedule every single day, and I map out everything I want to accomplish. And I have that quote literally in my schedule. Do you want to feel the pain of discipline, or do you want to feel the pain of regret? I obviously, it's preferable to feel the pain of discipline.
Hmm.
So he's like, dude, I envy like the fact that you're this disciplined. And I'm like, yeah, I had to go through some shit to get to this point though. Like I
Yeah.
went through a lot of regret to get to this point where I'm like, I'd prefer the pain of discipline.
Well, and sometimes that those obstacles and everything force it, right?
For
Like,
sure.
definitely the spot I was in when I was working in that corporate world, that forced change. Like,
Hmm.
there was no other option, right? Like, my wife was like, wasn't that she gave me an ultimatum? It's like, but there was an ultimatum there, and her ultimatum was, it was like, I'm going to lose you one way or the other.
Hmm.
Okay. Meaning, we're either this gonna end in us divorcing, or this gonna end in you taking it further and committing suicide or something like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's I wasn't suicidal, but it was like, it was to that point, right? So you actually, sometimes you get to that point where it's like there is no other choice, right? There's no other
Yeah.
choice.
No. And yeah, I mean the sadness aspect of it I didn't really feel, but man, the regret, like it was overwhelming, and it was something I never wanted to experience again. And I don't want I understood there laying in a hospital bed that I don't want to be the type of person who is on my deathbed and is like just full of regret. I want to look back and have had a blessed life and done everything, not necessarily everything I wanted to do, but just had good relationships with people, had an enjoyable time. And you talked about this on the show before, just enjoyed the journey,
Yeah.
like the journey that was your life. So many people just they don't live in the present, they don't live in right now. And that's what the whole thing with like ice plunges and stuff like that people are doing, that's all about living in the present, like live in the right now. And people are
Yeah.
starting to understand that like it's really hard to be in the right now because we have so many distractions and phones and internet and social media and all that stuff. And I didn't have any of that in the hospital. And man, being present with yourself for that long a period of time by yourself it can either be really scary, it can be really good. And for me, it was both. It was terrifying, but it was also a good thing to go through. And
Yeah.
it, it leads into the next thing on the list, which is restlessness and daydreaming, which you and I both do a ton of.
My God. And I get
So,
pissed at myself for it.
oh, me too.
I do. I like, you can get into like things like doom scrolling or whatever, but even myself, like, it's just like trying to figure out what it is that I want,
Hmm.
like, what's making me so restless in my head, like, where do I want things to go to feel happy? um yeah, but it pisses me off, like, like, I get to the point where I'm like, what are you doing?
Hmm.
Like, just be happy or something, like, just work towards what you've been working towards. But it just doesn't work that way for me. In fact, when things get successful for me, when like I've built something to the point where it's actually like sustainable and working, um, I almost go through like a mild depression or something, like you did with ending your book. Like,
Yeah.
where I'm just like, I enjoyed that build up. I enjoyed
Mhm.
building the thing to this point, and now it feels like there's not a good spot to build it. I don't know. I don't know how to
Yeah.
explain it.
No, no, I understand what you mean. There's this it's letting go. Like it's hard to let go of something because it feels like it's a part of you, whether it's a project or it's honestly I think this is gonna sound crazy to people who aren't the creative types, but I think it's similar to what parents go through when they let their kids go. Like when you let your kids go to college. That's what I used that when I was in this newspaper interview I did. I said it feels to me like I'm letting my kids go to college when I release my book. And I'm sure people thought that was insane, but that was what I felt. Like there was a real pain that I felt to like letting this thing go. Like I could no longer go tinker with it at night, which was like one of my favorite hobbies, just tinkering with my book and being like, there was like an element of control. And I guess it's kind of like, when your kids live in your house, you can go open their bedroom door and look at them, be like, oh, they're so sweet. But then when they
Yeah,
go to
yeah,
college, they're not there, in most cases. So you've kind of had this feeling of like emptiness or letting go.
yeah.
Um,
Well, and they say
you,
that you
oh,
spend
go.
90% of your life with your kids in that first 18, 19 years, right?
Yeah,
And then after that, it's only 10% of their life
yeah,
that they're going to spend with you for the rest of it, right? So,
yeah. It's pretty insane when you think about it. Yeah, like that was what my existence was like with my parents. Just all of a sudden, boom, I'm gone, and
yeah.
that was 20. I left my parents' house almost 21 years ago,
Hmm.
and yeah,
I was
that's it.
18. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, it's a bit wild. You talked about doom scrolling. I really think that doom scrolling has replaced daydreaming.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I was getting at about when you were in the hospital too, is you didn't have that option. So you had to scroll in your head, right? You actually didn't have that distraction that made you not think and think creatively.
Yeah,
Um, so you're right.
yeah. And I actually, in my schedule that I was showing my friend the other day, I actually have everything broken down into priorities A, B, C, D, E. I've showed this to
Okay.
you before, but for the audience, like priority A is like I have to do this today or there's going to be consequences to it. B
Yeah.
is it would be good to do this today, but if I don't, there's no consequences. C is this is something that would be cool to get done, but I don't really need to do it right now. D is this is something I can delegate to somebody else. And then E is this is something I can eliminate entirely. And in E is doom scrolling.
Social media. Yeah.
So and social media. Yeah, other than like posting stuff for this show, E is like social media, doom scrolling, like get rid of showering, taking care of my child. I'm kidding, of course. But yeah, doom scrolling and social media can go. I shower every Tuesday just like I always have. I one thing I think too is that when you are somebody who daydreams a lot, like we do, or has like professional restlessness, like I think we both do,
Hmm.
it makes it really hard to focus on one thing. Like you and I have so many projects that we're working on. Like we've written a TV pilot. Actually, we've written an entire TV series for the book along with
Oh yeah.
Chad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wrote an entire series for my book. We've written a TV pilot. We obviously do this show together. Um,
Yeah.
like we've done a lot of projects together, and for a long time, we had a really hard time just focusing on this podcast because we were just
Yeah.
all over the place. And I think that comes from just the restlessness of just not being fulfilled professionally yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And like my business is a creative business too. So it's hard to balance like not draining yourself creatively. Um, cause yeah, when you're creating videos all the time, and then my side hobby or job or whatever we want to call this podcast, my side thing that we're trying to grow is also video. So I'm doing video for my business all day, and then at night I'm doing video for this podcast. So it's you're right, focus is can be a challenge, and just mainly like trying to make sure that it's enjoyable, right? That it's all enjoyable. Otherwise, like, why are we doing it?
Yeah. And I think I should give context around my job to kind of play into yours. So you own your own business. You do something that you do love to do. You do it for a living. Like you went to school to make videos, to make films and stuff like that. It's something you
Mhm.
clearly enjoy, and we do it as a side hustle. My career, I work for a very good company that pays me very well. I have excellent benefits. I have a lot of autonomy. I have a lot of freedom. I have all the things that almost anyone would want in a job,
Mhm.
right? Like traditionally, like what we're kind of programmed to like. I have all those things. If my
Yeah.
kids are home from school, I can take care of them and balance my work. If I need to get my kid early at school, I don't have to like go through checks and balances to like I got to get my kid. Is that okay? Like none of that exists for me. So
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate in that way. I do work for a big company, and again, they treat me very well. So like everyone outwardly would probably look at my life and my career and go, "This guy's got it made." But with that, the fact that it is quite cushy what I do. I talk to people all day and I write. That's my entire job is talking and writing. I'm not digging
Yeah.
ditches. I'm not building cars. I've had some shit jobs in my life. Literally, I pumped septic tanks in college, like as shitty as it gets.
Yeah, that
I
is
had
that's about as shitty as it gets. Yeah.
it's literally as shitty as it gets. Yeah, that was a great job, by the way. It was pretty terrific. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, like I have it as good as you could possibly have it professionally, but there's just like it's unrelenting the restlessness I have because I think for part of it is like the midlife crisis aspect of it. That's weird.
Is that the way you talk now in your midlife? Just
I'm disguising my British accent, I guess. I
midlife
don't know.
crisis.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what that was, but yeah, like part of it I think is the fact that I've gone through a midlife crisis and there's a restlessness that I have, and it's like I'm not doing all I can. Like I think
Mhm.
the comfiness of what I do is playing into the midlife crisis. Like there's a lot more that I can give than this, than
Mhm.
having this kind of cushy job, and there's a lot of ways I can challenge myself. So yeah, I think that is part of why I believe I had a midlife crisis at that point.
Okay.
Yeah. So the next
What's the next
thing,
one on the yeah.
irritability.
Oh,
Stop cutting me off. Fuck's
shut
sake.
up. Shut
Would you
up.
shut the hell up? Anyways, I don't think I'm irritable. I so I
I definitely am, man. Like,
oh you're very irritable.
shut
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. Yeah. See? You're just a crusty old man.
I've always been irritable though. Like
You were
you wouldn't
irritable when
film.
I met you. Yeah.
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 You know what though? I was just listening to so Theo Vaughn had a therapist on his show called Tim Fletcher, and he specializes in childhood trauma and stuff like that, and shame and guilt and all this stuff. And one of the big um, indicators is that irritability, like snapping on a dime. And a lot of that is because maybe you didn't get the right attention or whatever from your parents. So that was how you sort of got that attention, and it carries over into your adult life.
Yeah. I could see that.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of people are irritable because they feel kind of like a caged animal
Hmm.
in their life. Like, you know, here I am in my 40s. I work a job I don't like. I don't have enough money. My kids are yelling. You know, you have all these things, but maybe you're not just happy about. And you feel boxed in. Like I'm stuck. I can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I have a dead end job, whatever it happens to be. I think a lot of people do feel irritability, and that is part of a midlife crisis. Like there's nothing more than this. This is it.
Yeah.
Um, and I go back to myself when I got out of the hospital. Like I did feel that, not towards like my wife or my family. I felt it towards my health. I literally felt like I was caged in. Like I mean, I was physically. I was stuck in a hospital bed for 6 weeks. I felt like a caged animal. Like people would bring me food and like just demolish this gross food. Like I felt like I was literally in a cage. And I got so irritable and angry during that time. And I definitely like that was part of what I feel was a midlife crisis.
Yeah. Do you find do you remember when we were talking to Joe Fells about like the printing press and basically that we're not meant to be doing the type of work that we're doing, like sitting in front of a computer and like working on Excel sheets and stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
we're meant to work with our hands and be outside. I don't know about you, but when I'm doing that type of work, if I'm outside, like building something, like building a deck or whatever it may be, all of that disappears for me. The only
Mhm.
irritability I'll find is if I hit my thumb with a hammer.
Yeah.
Like otherwise, like I'm pretty much at peace. So I don't know if you find that.
Yeah, I do. I find like I'll complain about these things, but I do for the most part enjoy it. But like gardening, I do enjoy it. Like I just put on music or a podcast or an audiobook and I'm I'm with my thoughts and I just garden or I cut the grass or I do get joy out of stuff like that. I've built decks. I built this basement with some other people, you know, stuff like that. There was certainly a sense of fulfillment doing those things because
Mhm.
it felt a bit, like you say, a bit more natural than just sitting on a computer and like pumping out spreadsheets. And we've really, you know, like Joe was talking about, we've really normalized a lot of these things that just flat out are not normal. And it
Yeah.
continues. Like we continue to try to normalize these things. Like the whole after the pandemic, everyone like all these businesses brought people back to the office and
Right.
they're like, come to the fast-paced, exciting environment that is this cubicle, this little box that you're
With
going
no
to spend 40
window
hours a
and
week in with no window and no sun. And if you're lucky, you'll get out for a 20-minute walk at your lunch break. And
yeah.
we brought it back to that. It's like during the pandemic, as much as it sucked, like people were at home. You got home,
Yeah.
you did not spend 2 hours in your car. The morning you'd wake up, you'd be with your family. You might go for a walk. You might exercise, whatever it happened to be. Lunch, you did the same thing. You were with your spouse. You'd have a nice meal. Dinner, you were already home with your kids. Like it just all felt natural. And now we've kind of gone back to, nope, go to an office, sit in a cage. You know,
Yeah. But
that's it.
we give you health benefits to deal with the rickets you'll develop.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. We give you a fitness subsidy so that after you sit on your ass for 8 hours, you can go to the gym for 45
Yeah.
minutes
And an
before you commute,
ergonomic
before you sit on
specialist
your
to
ass. Yeah, before you sit on your ass for another hour to drive home.
yeah.
But you got that 45 minutes in the gym, so you should
Yeah.
feel pretty good. I'm not irritable about that though. I'm not angry about it. I'm not upset. I'm not upset. But you know what? Um, you know, I there's this guy I follow on Instagram, and our Instagram actually I've followed it too because I think he'd be an interesting person to talk to.
Yeah.
His Instagram handle is Hub's Life.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so he posts these videos, and I honestly watch them, and I feel conflicted as I watch them. But basically, his Instagram is these videos of him living his life. He's a guy from Texas. He's about to have a kid. He's 29 years old. He works an office job. He has a nice middle class home and lives a very quiet middle class like suburban life.
Mhm.
And he posts these videos of him just doing chores around his house, going to work, you know, playing with his dog and all this stuff. And it's a very peaceful, nice existence.
Right.
And he is very polarizing to people because some people are like, oh, this is so like sweet and it's like a nice little life and it's kind of heartfelt and there's like a comfort that you feel watching it. And that's what I feel. I feel comfortable watching it. But then
Yeah.
there's the other side of it where I watch it and it's like the cynic in me is like, I don't want that to be my life. Like that just be my life, working in an office and, you know, doing these menial tasks. Like I want my life
Yeah.
to be more than that. And I use it to like kind of comfort myself, but also kind of inspire me to have a different life than that. And, you know, I watch him and I'm like, and I think he's got a really good thing going. And like his social media obviously is big. So he's going to make a living at that. But I think like if this is a regular person and that's their life, they are one layoff away from potentially becoming a statistic in the
Mhm.
opioid epidemic. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
seriously, like getting laid off from your job is one of the most traumatic things that can happen to somebody. And like if it happens to him, like he'll be fine. He's got a social media following, but like to the average person, like that can cause a midlife crisis, right?
Yeah.
You lose your career. It's like losing a member of your family. Like it's the same type of emotion. And Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
To be
I
honest with
think
you, that was a big part for me. Like when I worked at the bank, was that fear of the layoff. Like I was doing a good job, but um, if you had a bad quarter, it was like suddenly you're on like performance review and all this stuff.
yeah,
It's like, well,
pip.
what about the other 3 quarters?
Yeah. Yeah, and that is kind of what keeps people in those, busting their asses, like just fear
Yeah.
and threats and stuff like
Well,
that. And
that's why I
that's a
always say, like,
yeah,
I find more risk in that than doing my own thing,
true.
because for me, like everything's in my control. It's in my hands. If I'm not getting business, I got to go out and get that business. That's not someone else dictating that for me, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, that risk piece definitely leaves people completely stressed out, worried, um, and it keeps them there, right? Because there's that fear of losing your job and your livelihood and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it keeps people irritable, right?
Hmm.
That is what ultimately keeps people irritable, is that they didn't take the risk, or they didn't, and then it goes back to, well, you daydream, like, what if I did start that business that I never started? And then you start to
Yeah,
feel restless in your job, and then you start to have your regrets, and it kind of just,
yeah,
this is what a midlife crisis is. I completely
yeah.
get it, and I feel I've already had it. But do you want to
Well,
go to the
and
next one, or you have
yeah,
another
I
point?
just want to add to that though. Like, I'd hate to make it seem like, there's a lot of influence out there that talk about like business being everything. Like, I'd hate for people to think like, okay, you start a business and it's all good. Like those stresses don't go away. They're still there. There is still that component of getting stuck and all that. So you just got to find ways to be able to pivot and wiggle around that. But I've definitely found myself stuck in my own business at times too, where it's like, oh, I'm doing stuff that I'm not really enjoying,
Hmm.
um, and how do I get out of this, because that's what pays the bills and all that stuff. But I guess the just that main advantage is that it's me. I can change that. You have that ability to change it. It's just you got to work at it, right?
Yeah, that's the pain of discipline, right?
Yeah.
um yeah, there's that quote, like, if you
Complacency is scary.
complacency is scary. My dad always told me that if you ever get complacent in a job, you should quit. Like, you should move on, because complacency is a killer. That's what he used to
Yeah.
say. And I never got it until I started working in the corporate world, and I got complacent at a job that I was really good at and was just super easy. And there's a different type of I don't know, restlessness that you feel when you have a job that you're good at that's easy, versus when you're, and I'm not saying it's better or worse, but when you work a job you hate, your restlessness is very different. Or a job that's like really difficult, your restlessness is different. I think also
Right.
your urgency is different, because when your job's easy and you get complacent, you have no urgency to leave.
Yeah.
Whereas the other side, if it's a job that you hate that's very difficult, their
It's like it's good
urgency gets
enough.
spiked.
It's
Yeah.
good enough. My boss isn't that much of a dick. Like,
Yeah, it's like the Chris Williamson quote about how, like, sometimes it's better if you have to go further, right? You have to go 2 kilometers instead of one. It might actually be easier, because if it's 1 kilometer, you'll walk. If it's two, you'll catch a ride with somebody. So it's actually been
right.
easier for you. Yeah, it's true. I mean, if something's harder, sometimes people need a good push out the door.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you never, yeah. Okay, so the next point was nostalgia. So rather than focusing on the positives of the present, you begin to idealize your past lifestyle. Maybe you reminisce about how athletic you used to be, or how expansive your social circle was in college.
Hmm. Yeah, I certainly find myself like in those nostalgic moments. Actually, a good example would be, so we went to film school, right? And I look back on that time very fondly as
Hmm.
like one of the best times in my life. And but it was also like we were working constantly. We were on sets constantly, no sleep, staying up late, getting up early. Um, and I went on a film set recently and realized, like, as I was sitting there watching them spend hours setting up like 2 shots, and like watching everyone running around in this like dirty place, and it was cold, and like moving all that gear and all this stuff, that it's really not wasn't the environment for me. It's not the environment for me now. Maybe it
Hmm.
would have been then, but it's not now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny how nostalgia sometimes works that way, where you're like, that's what I want, that's what I want, and then you actually go and do that or see it, and it's like, it's not what I want.
Yeah, it's so true. Especially socially, people you get to our age where you're, around 40.
Hmm.
Um and you start to look back and you're like, "Oh, it's so much fun with my buddies and we were always together and we were always laughing and we were always having fun." And you think like, "That's so great. I miss that." And then your friend calls you and you're like, "Oh, really?" Like that's my I'm like, "Friday, you want to go out 2 Fridays from now, you want to go out?" Like, "Really? I don't think I'm going to want to. I don't want to leave my house." So I
Yeah,
I do have that feeling where like I idealize these moments in my past, but then I'm like, then I kind of come back to reality. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I don't really want that actually." Like, it was nice
yeah,
at the time because I had all the energy and that was sort of what fulfilled me or filled my cup, I guess, at the time, but it's
yeah.
not life anymore. But yeah, that is what nostalgia is, right? I'm the same as you. Like, I loved my time at film school. We were always together with our friends, like all day, every day. And we
Mhm.
laughed our asses off every day
Yeah.
for 14, 16, 18 hours a day. And we never slept. And we just, like, we lived off coffee and, I lived off coffee and cigarettes. And like, people lived off weed and and like booze. And we ate
And there was
shit and we had
yeah,
no
there was
money.
like this freedom to just kind of do your own thing and be creative and like experiment, right? Like experiment and create different things that like now the situation I'm in where like I got to make a living at it and I'm working for businesses doing their ads and things like that. It's like, oh, I can't be as like
Yeah.
creative and crazy ideas and try to piece those together and all that stuff. It just doesn't work the same when you've got someone else like dictating it. So,
Yeah. And when I was stuck, like laid up in the hospital and thinking about like nostalgic moments, I used to think about like how much risk I was willing to take on, kind of like what you're talking about. Like when we were working on our films, like there was a moment where we were shooting my film in an airplane hangar
mhm.
and we didn't really know what we were doing and whether it would work. Like we were lighting things, we're like, boy, I hope this works. Like,
I hope this
and
actually looks like a car driving at night.
yeah, yeah, we were just doing like a car nights shots,
Yeah.
and simulating the movement and the lights and stuff like that. And I remember going to you and just being like, "Do you think any of this is gonna work?" And you're like, "I don't fucking know." And I was like, "Let's do it
In
anyways. We're
theory, like
here." Yeah,
it's all
yeah, we're
theory.
doing. Yeah, all our math is good. Like all our exposure's good. It should work. And we're just like, let's roll with it. Let's just do it. Like,
Yeah.
what's the worst that happens? It doesn't work. Okay. But yeah,
Yeah.
as you get older, you know, you lose that because everything comes grounded in like, I gotta grind out, paychecks. I got bills. I got responsibilities. I got kids. I got a wife. I got all these things to take care of. And yeah, that appetite for risk sort of disappears. And I think for me, I was having a very nostalgic moment, just thinking back to how much risk I used to be willing to take. I moved across the
Mhm.
country when I had no money. When I graduated
Right.
from film school, I moved to Vancouver. I had no money. I had no place to live. I moved out there with a bag, and I was like, I will just see what happens. Like, let's just see if we can make a go of it. And I signed a lease to live in a place in Vancouver, which is like one of the most expensive cities in the world.
Yeah.
I signed a lease there. I lived there for over a year and just made shit work and was willing to take all kinds of risks. I'd go to Hastings Street to go like hang out. I worked on Hastings Street. It was like the most dangerous area of Canada. I was just like, what's the worst that'll happen?
Yeah.
Nowadays, nowadays I'm like in my car looking, be like, I think that guy has a crack pipe, and I'm like terrified of it. He's 2 miles that way. I can see his pipe. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird how you get older and you just lose
Well,
all that.
I don't remember if is it Chris Williamson or Hormozy or someone that talks about like if you're hanging out with people that all they want to talk about is nostalgic moments, that you should probably distance yourself from them,
Yeah,
just because you're never moving forward. Then you're just always like looking to the past and like you're reminiscing, but you're not. It's like, well, if you want to do that stuff, then do it, but don't just reminisce about it and spend all your time reminiscing.
it's true. you know, something I've noticed in my circle of friends. It's gotten smaller, of course, as it usually does as you get older. But the people that I've kept closest to me, we spend a lot less time reminiscing and a lot more time talking about ideas
Yeah.
and talking about like, you know, where we want our lives to go, and you know, much bigger things than like how we used to get drunk in college and stuff like that. Like, we've sort of forgotten it, and I think that was a big moment for me moving through what I feel was a midlife crisis, is that I stopped talking about that stuff for the most part. I still do once in a while, but I stopped living in that and stopped honestly just caring. Like, I
Yeah.
don't really care about the mistakes I made. I've learned from most of them, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be fuel for me going forward. But like, everything that's out of my control, I don't think about and or worry about anymore. And it took going through some shit, and as you know, going through a lot
Yeah.
of shit to just move past it. And that's what anxiety is worrying about like the future and things that you can't control. And somehow going through something really bad made me just let it all go. It's like that
Hmm.
song from Frozen, Let It Go. That's me.
I've never heard it. All
Okay.
right. What's the
I'm
next
sure
point?
you have. All right. So the next point is impulsive or indulgent behavior. Now, you said you don't feel that you do this. I don't
I'm
either
trying to think,
anymore.
like, besides, like, yeah, not really. Like,
I'm
I'm definitely not someone that goes out, runs out, and buys a car. Like,
Yeah.
I'm the opposite of that. I'm trying to drive my car into the ditch, like
Yeah.
just ground it. But
I bought the cheapest car I could possibly buy. So it was like $12,000 cheaper than every other car I could get at the time. So that was
yeah,
that was my level of like indulgent or impulsive behavior. But I will steel man or sort of play devil's advocate with you. I
okay,
don't believe that you're impulsive or take part in indulgent behavior now, but you go back a few years to when you
mm,
may or may not have been going through your own midlife crisis, and I'll do the same for me as well.
yeah,
Immediately before I went into the hospital, so like the year leading up to it, I was not drinking heavily, but I was drinking a lot, like probably more than I had for quite a while. Now, it was the height of the pandemic, so there's really not much to do. So I would
yeah,
drink, and I ate a lot. And again, I know everyone was during the pandemic, but I definitely indulged and put on some lbs.
yeah.
For you, you kind of indulged in a different way, or you were like impulsive in a different way. So when the
Oh,
pandemic started,
yes, yes. Okay,
do
I
you
know
know
where
where I'm
you're
going with
going
this? Yeah.
with all my outdoor,
Yeah.
like,
That's
like,
exactly where I'm going. You
yeah.
went, so you're, yeah, I'll go ahead. You can tell it better than I can.
Yeah. So I don't think this was indulgent. I'm just gonna
Oh,
say that
bullshit. Yeah, I think it
I
was.
was going through some like very big mental challenges around the pandemic for sure. Just
Mhm.
that uncertainty.
Yep.
And the only as we talked about before, working outdoors clears my mind, makes me feel like clear, all that stuff. So I just started digging. I just started digging in my backyard, and I created front flower bed all the way around my house. I did a back patio. I created flower beds around that. Yeah, just started like working on nesting, landscaping. But to be honest with you, a lot of that was just to keep my mind from just going through the crazy shit it was going through.
Yeah. So while it's not necessarily big purchases, it is for you. I remember like calling you and being like, "What are you doing?" You're like, "Oh, I just put in a pool." I'm kidding. It wasn't quite that one, but you were
No,
always
I did
putting
put in
in
a
new
pool that
things.
year. I did.
Did
You're
was
right.
it that year? Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, I
So I
got
mean,
an
you weren't
above ground
really.
pool for free, but I got an
Yeah,
above ground
true.
pool and I put it in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It wasn't necessarily indulgent, but it was a lot of impulsive behavior.
Impulsive, yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll agree
so
with that.
I did the same, dude. During that year, I finished my basement. I built a deck. We finished our fireplace. It's like a 20-foot fireplace in our living room. Finished all that shit. Built fences. Like I did it too. There's a lot of very impulsive, like, well, it's a pandemic. I might as well just do these things. And I indulged too, especially in food and drink in those years. But
Yeah.
that was right before, yeah, going through. what I feel. I mean, it was probably part of a midlife crisis. I think the pandemic just made it happen earlier for me. I really do. I think it just like it was coming and it just sort of expedited it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think though before that. So when I was 36 and leaving the bank and all that, was I indulging in probably alcohol for sure? Yeah, I
Yeah.
was probably drinking quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I feel like I've wiped all that out of my memory. So I'm trying to think. The most indulgent stuff was I was buying a ton of camera equipment, but that was because I was trying to find a way to leave there, and the only thing I could think of was to do a business with what I knew best.
Yeah. Makes
So
sense.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think that like with you doing everything that you were doing around your house, a lot of that was trying to fill a void and obviously distract you from other things. But you
definitely.
were, it never seemed like you were satisfied with what you had accomplished there. And that sort of plays into like the midlife crisis, being impulsive and things like that. And I was the same.
I'm still never satisfied. To be honest with you, I'm tearing a lot of that out and redoing it again this year.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I don't
insane.
know, never satisfied, but
No,
yeah.
you're a little bit of a perfectionist, which kind of plays outside of the whole midlife
Oh yeah.
crisis thing. Yeah.
That's its own problem for sure.
Yeah, you've been a perfectionist as long as I've known you, dating back to 2005, 19 years
Hmm.
ago, which is pretty wild to think about. We've known each other. It's half my life.
Yeah.
Actually, it's more than half now.
It's crazy.
All right. So let's get into the next one, which is we're almost out of time, so this is probably the last one we'll get to. Changes in ambition. So obviously, I mean, we've gone through this a few times, but they say in the article you might feel motivated to make changes to your life, such as moving to a new area, buying a new home, or attaining a higher position at work. This could be an attempt to correct what you perceive now as bad past decisions. On the other hand, you might just feel less motivated to reach for other goals as you begin to question your purpose in life.
Hmm.
Boy,
That one
nailed
hits
it.
home.
Yeah, that hits you right in the right in the feels. Yeah.
Yeah.
I, I'm trying to think of where to start with this because it's right, like hits it right on the head.
Yeah. I think like I don't know if this is the perfectionism or what it is, but that you were talking about before, but I definitely feel restless like all the time and trying to like, okay, what more can I do? What can I change? I think I'll say one thing. If anyone out there is thinking of starting a business from something that they did as a hobby that they really enjoyed, the one thing you got to consider is when you're turning your hobby into a job, you lose that hobby.
Yeah.
So you might want to find another hobby.
Have you found another hobby?
Second story. Yeah. I would
That's your
say
hobby?
I think so. I need something more like, or I need to do something more with second story or something else entirely. But yeah, when you turn a hobby into a career, it definitely takes something away from it because now I can't just run out and shoot something. I got to think, okay, is this something I need to be making money at for a living and to pay my staff and all that kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then when I think about doing something creative now, like some kind of video or film project or something like that, I actually get excited about it for a moment, and then I go, my shoulders like drop, and I'm like, it sounds like a lot of work, right? Because it's the same work that I do daily,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I guess that's all I'll say about that is like my ambitions are usually around how do I like create something that's like not a job that's just enjoyable for me.
Yeah, actually that's something Ryan Holiday talks a lot about too, is he talks
Maybe I need
about
to
how you
read
need
this.
to. Yeah, you do need to read this. It's very good, but he's got a great YouTube channel as well called The Daily Stoic. I highly
Oh, okay.
recommend that. It's a big one. Every day he does a video and it hits home usually for me. I usually start my day by watching it at like 5:15 or
Yeah.
whenever my kids wake me up. But yeah, so he talks about how it's extremely important that you have a hobby, and it should not be based around like technology and things like that. So it shouldn't be like doom scrolling or like watching reality TV. Like it needs to be something that's away from all of those things, like raising animals or playing a sport or like doing something where you're actually, you have time in your thoughts, but also like it gets you moving around and,
Hmm.
it's relatively healthy. I would say right now that my hobby is probably also second story. Um, it
Yeah.
used to be writing, but now I write for a living. So writing is no longer really my hobby.
Isn't that
Uh,
funny? Hey, how that changes
yeah.
it, right? All of a
Yeah.
sudden, when you're making money at it, it changes what it was. Like it was this cool creative thing that you did. It still is, but it was like this thing that made you different and that you were
Yeah.
excited about doing. And you would run downstairs to like, you know, pull open the laptop and try to continue on. And now it's like, I got to punch in.
Yep. That is what it feels like. So
Yeah.
I wrote second story for 12 years for free. I didn't make a cent writing. I wrote 12
Right.
years of my life literally for nothing. Then I put the book out, sells a few thousand copies, and bam, all of a sudden I have an offer to freelance write and make money at it, and now it's become a job. I still love it, still enjoy it, but
Yeah.
the sort of being free to sort of write what I want to write and do it my way is gone because I make money at it now. I got to do it within a structure. I have to do it the way somebody else wants me to do it.
Yeah.
I have to get critiqued by somebody who probably can't write as good as I can, which is always a tough thing when you're a certain level at something. Not to like brag that I'm the best writer. I'm dyslexic. I'm sloppy as hell at writing, but I think
Yeah.
I'm like an engaging storyteller. So all those things you have to deal with when you start making money. Like
Yeah.
it's a different animal. And I look at this show that we're doing that I have just a ton of fun doing. Like last night I wrote till 10 o'clock because I had to get some articles done. I wrote till 10 o'clock. Actually it was like 10:15, and then I just made two YouTube shorts from like
Hmm.
10:15 till midnight. I just pumped out two shorts, had a blast doing both of them. And I
Yeah.
was like, I love doing this. But as soon as we have one of those, like we've had a few of them hit some pretty big, like nothing's gone viral yet, but we've hit some big numbers on those videos. As soon as we have one that does like 100,000 views or
Yeah.
more, and we start to make money off that, it's going to become a whole lot less fun. And that's just the way it is. And I think that's one of the hardest parts of going through a midlife crisis is
Cause then
that
you'll be
you're
chasing that. Right.
well, yeah, you're chasing that high, but like you have this ambition that I want more through
Hmm.
this midlife crisis. Like I want to get this bigger house, or I want this better job, or more pay, or whatever it happens to be. And then if you're able to do it, which not everybody is, but if you are able to step up to the next level, man, it's just like you're constantly chasing that high, and you never satisfy it. And then I
Right.
wonder if that what like the next 25, 30 years of our life is like you created a business out of nothing, and like
Hmm.
that first paycheck I'm sure you got for your video, which I think was from me, maybe one of the first. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope.
It was one
Yeah,
of the first. Your wedding.
sorry it bounced. That's my wife's fault.
Yeah.
Kidding. But like as soon as you got that check, you probably had this like incredible feeling, and then nothing ever measures up to that again.
Hmm.
And that's how I felt when like my book came out. It's like this amazing feeling, like all these sales coming in and money coming in. I was like, hell yeah, dude, like this is awesome. And then within a week it was just like it's business. Like it's
Yeah.
become a job. It's a tough thing, and when you're going through it and you're having this sort of crisis of who you are, it's a weird thing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
very strange, but yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it in the help guide in terms of like a midlife crisis. So again, I think I had one a few years ago, and now that I've talked to you, I kind of think you did too.
I think I'm still in it.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't feel like I am. I feel like I'm
I
not
think you've
like
been more focused this year than I've ever seen you. Like more like I know kind of the things that I want to do. I don't think I've ever seen you this focused.
no. And I one thing that my wife and I have talked a lot about over the last like 2 years. My wife and I had like a really in depth conversation one night because I used to be. I mean, for people that don't know, I used to be somebody that paid a lot of attention to like current events in the world and like politics and all this shit that you know. has very little impact on my life. And it used to like drive me nuts, like some of the
Yeah.
stuff. And I'm sure everybody felt that way during the pandemic. But my wife and I had a conversation one night, and she was basically like, why do you do this to yourself? Like, you do not have control of these things.
Mhm.
And through that, having that conversation and like reading stuff like this and like kind of embracing like stoicism and the idea that like just worry about what you can control, and like your reaction to events
Yeah.
is is what makes you feel whatever you're going to feel. Once I started to realize that like how I react to things determines how I'm going to feel about things, I stopped having reaction to a lot of things that will probably not ever impact my own life. That's not to say that I just like poo poo world events, like, oh, war, who cares? Like, I still care about that stuff, but I have
Yeah.
no control over it. So, I have my feelings towards it, but I can't sit around worrying about it unless it
Right.
is something that's going to impact me. So that's been a big change for me, and it's brought me a lot more happiness, a lot more focus, stuff like that. I think it's important that all you can worry about is what you can control. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, yeah, maybe
Awesome.
maybe we are still in it, but as one thing that to people who are not middle aged yet, who haven't gone through it, one thing that you do learn as you go through a midlife crisis, I'm sure you would probably mirror this. Man, do you ever figure out who you are? Like, holy
You do.
shit.
Yeah.
I really did not know who I was like 7-8 years ago, but now in today I really know who I am, and I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at, and I know where I need to get better. And it's a weird thing to have a good sense of self.